Okay, it's about 2 after. This webinar will be recorded, so we'll plan to post this on the US-RSE conference website afterwards. But I'll be speaking today about managing your digital presence as a research software engineer. And so I understand we had quite a few people sign up, but perhaps just today's time just ended up Friday and such. So nonetheless, happy to lead a discussion here today about best practices in managing your digital presence. So first things first, why should we think about my digital presence? There are various aspects to consider. First off, there's an opportunity for increased visibility, especially for potential folks that are looking for employment or ways in which to collaborate and work with others. It's a way to showcase your skills and projects. There are various networking opportunities in terms of connecting with others, be it via like GitHub or LinkedIn, Mastodon, or other social media sites that can be accentuated through your personal website, for example. You're also able to then stay current by maintaining and keeping track of your digital presence profiles. Engaging with those sort of spaces, whether it's a personal website or social media space, allows you regularly reassess, how you're aligning yourself with your career goals and other interests in research software. Also just helps build reputation and lets you be known by your community and peers and builds trust over time. Over time as well, it provides for career flexibility. Can help automatically promote yourself without much effort towards potentially being exposed to alternative full-time or freelance roles and other projects, and help to just showcase your impact, especially if you, even in a current job, can help highlight ways in which you might say be reviewed each year by your colleagues in terms of performance evaluations and such. It also just creates an accessible portfolio. So every time maybe you do apply for a new position or you're sharing details about yourself, you can quickly one-off just share everything to one site, and that can be an easy way to further that conversation without rehashing everything about yourself every single time you make a new contact. So let's think about first who searches for your digital presence. There can be various folks, primarily if you're building software, one of the first things you might think of are people that use your software. So whether that could be like an end user that don't necessarily even look at the software itself. Sometimes it might see your GitHub profiles, for example, or at least something about you who made the software, or even other people that might want to write code about your software or connect into that ecosystem. There's also other researchers that might be using your software as well, or people in that space. Other collaborators you could potentially work with, an advisor, institution, or employers, journal editors looking for reviewers, funders and other societies and community groups. All these different types of folks can be those that might be interested in looking at who you are as a person in terms of ways in which they might want to connect with you or otherwise work with you. These sort of tools and ways in which you present yourself online are easy ways to coordinate expanding your network and increasing citability of your work, and highlight your contributions to the scientific community. Some examples of digital presence, I mentioned a few already that are kind of common in the community. Just having a personal website, and there are paid options you can do, but there's also free options via GitHub, is what I'll focus on mostly today. You also have places like LinkedIn, where that's kind of a common employment career-oriented social media platform. Though if you're not a fan of social media platforms like LinkedIn, you're not necessarily expected to do so. But just think about all the places you might show up in social media, whether it's a professional oriented social media space or a non-professional one. Even Slack profiles are in a sense a social media space. I don't know if you ever clicked on someone's profile icon on Slack. Some people fill those out and include contact information or details about themselves, and you can also easily just add a link to your personal website in your Slack profile. That's one way in which you can maintain connections between all your different ways in which you're showing up online. There's other places you can get engaged. Perhaps if you want to put content out there, such as through blogging platforms like Substack or Discuss. You could even have a YouTube video series you might publish or want to get engaged with, or podcasting. Those are other options as well. Community forums, these are to be project specific and set up for a specific community of interest, either be it on a website using a bulletin board type system, or even a Discord server. Stack Overflow exists as well, but that's a very large ecosystem that's hard to narrow down to a specific area of interest unless you're just very passionate about engaging in the Stack Overflow community. There's also maybe your sites you've set up on your within your employer, or maybe your school has provided a website for you to post personal information, or where your information is already provided. And those can be useful portals to at least be aware of, and oftentimes even edit and enhance if given the opportunity. Even for the specific projects you might work on, like beyond just a personal website for yourself, each project or software space can even have their own websites you can put out there. And it's especially important to think about how well you're documenting some of the, what exactly you're offering with a code project you're putting online. Other options include that can be connected into a personal website, or say like link trees, for example, or there's open source versions of the same, as shared with me by Nicole Brewer, part of the US-RSE community. These are, just, a simple website that can connect to various other places on the internet where identities about yourself might exist. And that could be a great way to organize things and provide a simple minimalist interface for all these sort of spaces. Obviously, this is not expansive. If you have any other thoughts or ideas there, I encourage you to add to the chat and engage in the group here about, other ideas you may have missed. But certainly, you're not limited to all the various options you have in the space. Another option why we want to think about a digital presence online is especially in terms of how we're promoting open science and collaborating across working through a scientific ecosystem. So nowadays there's been more and more discussions around open science within scientific communities, and definitely in how we foster that effectively. And so practicing open science as well as with our digital persona and other ways in which we promote our work online can definitely help enhance the ways in which science is practiced and increase collaboration, as well as the reproducibility and extendability of your work. So some platforms and tools you might think about that prioritize serving the scientific enterprise. One I would highly recommend it first off is ORCID. I would include RSEs within that space if you are anywhere close at all to publishing, or even want to publish software that's more in the academic style, which is also a current discussion point around how software is included in the scientific ecosystem. You can certainly sign up for an ORCID ID, and this would be a permanent identifier that follows you with any publication or material you put out in terms of within the scientific journal ecosystem, for example. Zenodo is one that's more is a open, more open kind of publishing platform where you're often encouraged to submit papers, even presentations, talks, sometimes even data sets that can be then openly referenced within Zenodo, and they help facilitate a pathway for creating also DOIs alongside those submissions automatically. DataCite is an organization that helps facilitate some of that citation structure in terms of data curation. And Code Meta even exists now as a way in which to standardize the metadata that might surround code software, where you can create a framework around how you describe your software, and then how that can be then automatically picked up and processed by a archival service such as Zenodo or other DataCite affiliated organizations. So one thing, say if you are using ORCID and have attributing appropriate a citation DOIs with, say, anything you publish, ORCID can then auto-update anytime, say, a new publication is found online, and add it to your profile. And it's important to say allow that, or at least review that every now and then. You'll typically receive an email after anytime ORCID finds a publication with your ORCID ID associated with it. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of how do you make this process easier, not only for yourself, but maybe also for researchers you partner with that may should be using some of these tools. So in the GitHub space, just thinking about this, there's a citation CFF file that you can add that can help create citability for your work. And with reference to the Code Meta platform, you can create a Code Meta JSON file in the root of your GitHub repos to help describe the software better and facilitate findability. All of these icons here are links in this presentation slide. So if you want to follow them along, feel free to scan the QR code that's on every slide today, and you're welcome to click on any links, and these slides will also be shared later for you to review. So for example, when I mentioned the citation CFF file, when you add that to the base of a GitHub repo, it'll add this cite this repository option. And this can be used to output text that could be imported into like an APA file document or a BibTeX document for others to then actually cite your software. And this is important, especially as software is becoming more centralized in terms of the scientific ecosystem and a necessary requirement alongside typical paper publishing practices. So some action steps you might consider to follow. You might, I would say initially, create a ORCID ID and could add a citation CFF file to a GitHub repo that you manage or work with lately. So this is some like easy stuff to do. And there's some digital presence checklists you can follow as recommended in these sort of open science spaces if you'd like to learn more. So maybe just a question for the audience here today. Which digital platforms are most important to you? The way in which I think it's helpful to navigate these sort of live questions is, give people some time to think about it, and then like we can all submit a response into the chat at the same time. So we have a small crowd today, but nonetheless, be good to maybe see what some folks think about this. And so when you have your set up your response into the chat, and then I'll count down from 3, and then just enter, and we can discuss what we see here today. So again, what digital presence platforms are most important to you? Like which of those that I just talked about like most resonated with you? When you're ready to submit, after 3, 2, 1, and push enter, and we'll see what some of you have to say. Well, yeah, I see some folks talking about like LinkedIn, there's Mastodon or X, formerly known as Twitter. I think for me, I personally like, just having a personal website. I just like that singular space to go to. Someone else mentioned ORCID, so I'm glad to see other folks hopefully using that platform. And so like, obviously the different people can have different priorities in terms of what's important to you. And I encourage you to think about what works best for you. And there's no hard and fast rule of what's necessary or expected. But there are some platforms that are getting greater traction with the community than others, and you might consider how you might engage with them or not. So in the same sense, the second question here, with your digital presence, you might choose to develop after today. What is most important to you to communicate? What do you want to communicate to the public in terms of like public-facing one, or are you more aiming to speak with other RSCs in terms of what you're putting online, and what it's important for any sort of content you're putting out online to think about who is that intended audience for that space. And so obviously nowadays most people can find these things rather publicly, but if you're intending to speak specifically to maybe other researchers in a specific domain and who may not be software experts, that could be one thing to think about. If you want to talk specifically to other software experts and other RSCs, that could be another way to think about in terms of like how you want to frame the material you're putting out there. So thanks to some community contributed examples, we're just going to talk through some other sites that folks have used in terms of like how they put themselves out online. And so the following that I'll go through in the next few slides are contributions from the community. And I encourage you, if you're part of already the US-RSE Slack, most of them are already part of that space. And so you're welcome to respectfully reach out to these folks and get additional guidance about the designs if you have any questions or ideas you want to discuss with folks. So here's one of those contributed by Eric Scott. He is a T-Science expert from what I can tell and seen online on his profile. But he has his own personal page here. Also, his GitHub page looks pretty active in terms of detailing his initial front page, using a README file that you're welcome to implement and put it on your GitHub in a way to create that interface. Another extra piece, which is optional for most folks. Oh, I didn't mean to get out of my presentation there, but nonetheless, there it goes. Nonetheless, there's a GitHub README stats that you can potentially add to your GitHub profile page if you like, to at least like track over time, say, the amount of engagement you're having in your space and showcase that in a more public way. I'd say it's entirely optional, and that to some people that'd be kind of stressful, maybe trying to gamify that in a way. So I would, consider that thoughtfully if you want to do that or not. And honestly, there's no expectation to that, and I would not judge people too harshly based off, amount of PR someone has done. But it's sometimes can be exciting just to see the degree to which people are engaging with their community. Another contribution was from Nicole Brewer. She has a simple kind of link tree example on the left here, and highlights a few select projects of hers that she's interested in, as well as her CV. Even there's a buy me a coffee option. If you want to support her financially, or even say schedule a time to meet and encourage that connection that way, that's always more than welcome. I think in terms of some of the unpaid work sometimes some of us do in terms of either volunteering for organizations like US-RSE or other ways that we're engaged in the community. So I very much encourage you to look through some of these examples and see the ways in which people are putting themselves online, and you're welcome to take that as inspiration and go with it any way that suits you. In this case on the left, this is actually a custom-made tree branch template that Nicole made, and so you're welcome to. She encouraged in sharing this for folks to use that as well, and even if they have any issues, submit PRs to it and offer their own suggestions if you'd like. And then that's part of the open science community ecosystem in terms of encouraging that collaboration. And so these are the type of ways in which you can have a more substantive relationship with other folks, even as well as like by seeing even the code that underlies some of the work they're developing, and having opportunity to collaborate with it through a version control system like GitHub. Miranda here also helps chair the US-RSE conference this year. This is her site that you're welcome to go to and explore. She has puts her profile front and center. As they'll drop down, so you can select and learn about herself and projects and publications she's worked on. But you can add as much information or as little information as you want, and there's plenty of different ways people approach this, and format's the same. And you can go to all these places, people's websites, and then even their GitHub profiles, and see how they actually coded it up, and even say fork it or try a different approach that's inspired by the same. And it's a lot of people are very open in the ways they do this, and I would encourage how you choose to engage with it. Another share was Brad Richardson, who even made their own custom URL for their site, everythingfunctional.com. They chose to, at least like on their homepage, talk about like their mission primarily, but that you can order and prioritize what exactly you want to focus. And I believe in this sort of style of website that they chose to develop. It's more focusing on the work on supporting the Fortran community, for example, and centering that as building that community around Fortran rather than, say, building a community around him himself. But obviously, you can still see like details about Brad here in the various contexts. There's even a blog that he writes that you can read and learn more about. But even a newsletter you could subscribe to if you'd like. And last one that I was actually two more. Gavin here has one with his personal website here. Even likes to highlight his GitHub profile the same. You can see here even like the contributions to the past profile. A lot of people like to look at the say number of commits over the time. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule about that, but some people are very much in tune with that. Some people not, but it's something to think about, at least in terms of how you want your main profile to look when someone opens it up. Here's one that I did for myself as also like a fun thing I did a long time back, and I would like to maybe update some a little bit, but it's more JavaScript based and kind of custom in terms of ways in which you can design a website. You can even like add some like fun little features into it. Like if you click my name in here, it will actually expand out to a different formatting and just have it my like nickname there for friends to read about if they like. But you can explore and do anything you like. The sky's the limit in terms of different ways you want to build out a site for people to engage with you on. So some common themes, just going through all the different sites. It may be a minimal design, or maybe there's dense information across the site, but there's personal preference to each of these people. Often though, there's a professional headshot somewhere on the site, typically prominent, but not required. You don't have to have yourself so publicly visible if for whatever reason you choose not to do that. That's not expected to violate your privacy if you want that greater privacy or not. So I'll typically have an about a biography section, plus typically a resume or CV section that's like easy to share with folks, and definitely can be helpful during interview processes or connecting with employers. Some include publication sections and or code project sections. Depending on your wealth of work yet, or you don't necessarily even have to have every single publication you've done or code or project you've done, but maybe you might choose a few select ones you want to highlight, and especially if there's, say, specific jobs you're aiming for and you want to focus on certain types of projects that might fit the types of roles you're aiming for. You may also include links to social media, blogs, podcasts, etc. Across your site, and whatever you want to emphasize. There's plenty of options, and it's up to you if you want to go all of the above or select only like professional ones, or include some of your personality and some of your site personal projects you do, just to help people connect with you better. I personally, if you saw my site earlier, I like to just share more about myself in terms of allowing people the opportunity to learn about me and connect with me on a more personal level, just encouraging that ways in which to engage with someone in a more friendly manner. But you can keep it all professional, or you can go somewhere in the middle. It's up to you. But nonetheless, like anything you might include can tend to focus on specific subject areas of expertise. Say, for example, with Brad's site and focusing on like his Fortran expertise. So that's something to think about in terms of what you might choose to share on a site. Again, there's encouragement to maybe buy me a coffee. Some can encourage an email contact or opportunity to schedule a meeting. There's even tools to do that in a more streamlined fashion that can integrate, say, with your calendar. I might note, however, if you want to share your email on your website, you might look into how to hide your email from bots using JavaScript or other tools. Leaving it in like a plain text within the HTML, for example, of the source of the website can leave it open to being scraped by bots and opening up to additional spam you may not want. Other sites have complex features, but they'll often just showcase their personality in fun ways, and so I encourage you to do that as you see fit for your own case. As a last point, it's important to design both for mobile and desktop. So if I had shrunk or expanded those websites, they would typically change and adapt to the screen size. So be sure to, whatever solution you choose to implement, that you are thinking about the different screens by which folks might visit your page. And think about like personal sites during the interview process. They can be linked directly from resume as needed, and I encourage you to do that, as many hiring managers will have limited time to review candidates. So it's important to use site design and how you're building out that site to feature the most relevant or impressive projects up front. You want to think about how you can frame what will capture that potential interviewer's attention, and acknowledge the fact that they only have limited time. They're not going to go through every single detail of your site, but maybe there's one or two things you really want to emphasize, and that can help give you that like little extra leg up, for example, in capturing someone's attention and making sure they want to actually speak with you, interview with you later during interview process. However, like a resume, there's no need to include every detail about past experiences on your website. So as I said earlier, you want to think about, be selective on what's important and choosing those 1 to 2 stories to flesh out. And it's, you don't necessarily have to, create a whole storyboard of things, but sometimes, just going through the process, reflecting on a project that's important to you, and maybe adding some more details about how it went, can really be meaningful towards how an interview can maybe proceed and how you maybe talk about those experiences. So, interviews are not only meant to inform not just your skills, but also how you actually work. And so part of that, could be, sharing your website and say, you can, here's one of the projects I posted on here. You can walk through these case studies and then how I described going through that work there. And, for RSE roles in particular, you might want to emphasize how you have collaborated with researchers through past work or experiences. You might also consider the STAR method that's common in the interview practices in terms of communicating the past work. And so you can think about, how you tell your story of your past work to like emphasize how you then can fit in with, current projects that an organization is asking for when you might be onboarding with them soon if they choose to hire you. So another set of questions here, and again, we'll ask for some audience participation in the same manner as before. So what do you like or don't like about some of these examples? And I think these folks here, they're very much open to any accolades and criticism. We all want to help each other out here. So like there's no hard and fast rule about what's correct, as I said, but maybe something just drew your attention, and what is most of interest to you, and what would you maybe like to see to replicate or not do? So as you are typing in some of those answers, just think about that and any other examples that inspire you to do something similar, and feel free to enter them in the chat. So I'll count down, and feel free to press enter when you're ready. So 3, 2, 1, and submit. So I see Diego mentioned bio here. So I'm assuming that's a like for the bio, just in terms of just a basic space to like offer, a description of yourself that you can lead and describe. I think that one of the main benefits of a website is like you can lead your own story. It's very much helpful to be able to create your own autobiography. If you want someone else to write it for you, then I suppose that's an option. But I think it's very beneficial to like think about when you build out a digital presence, like how do you want to be perceived? That can also be a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways towards ways in which you're aiming for your presence to be seen, and thus then how that actually ends up happening. It's kind of like a mindset shift psychologically. And say you want to work more with GPUs, and you talk about some of your past GPU projects, as the moment you start doing that will actually may come to fruition. So I'll just move on here in terms of like the actual process of like building some of these GitHub hosted personal sites. So it's relatively straightforward, at least on GitHub. For example, to just start out creating a GitHub page, you would typically hopefully you already have a GitHub profile, but from there you just create a new public repository to put it that is public, and you name it your username.github.io. And then you'd go ahead with that repo and clone it to whoever you want to edit it from, or which way you want to edit it. And then you'd like add a index file to that clone, and you'd end up committing then pushing the edit. So if for example, you can push a basic hello world HTML file as the initial index file. And then once it's uploaded, you should be able to go to the username.github.io site, and you'll see that hello world text there. If you want, there's some additional steps for, say, a custom paid domain, such as name.com or any other name you might want. But feel free to follow the links on this slide if you'd like to explore those options. So after doing that, it's a little bit overwhelming because, like, honestly, it's like basically a very blank slate. Hello world is one thing, but to actually build a full website, it can be a substantial amount of work. But one primary recommendation I would make is that you really shouldn't do it from scratch. There's plenty of custom templates and site options out there. And if you want to extend it and add your own like preferred design standards through CSS or some JavaScript functionality, go ahead and do that. But I would find a template you like and then go from there to make changes as you might prefer. So GitHub itself provides some topics, community forums about some website templates people contributed. If you want to get into the blog space and have that work alongside GitHub, you can. Jekyll's often supported and encouraged. GitHub does through its publishing paradigm, like actually use Jekyll to build sites when it's utilized. Other options, which is even included by some of the examples I shared earlier, is using Porto. And so Porto is also, at least as a framework, is offered to the community as an open source scientific technical publishing system. So they not only support building out websites and things, but they also support publishing books and other documentation platforms or interactive dashboards or ways to interact with data in a meaningful way. And so it also targets publishing dynamic content from like Python, R, and Julia. So in that sense, it's already relatively friendly towards someone who's going from a software engineering background. So for example, and this website image to the right here is also hyperlinked if you want to click it. But this will go to the actual like source code for how that Porto code was actually put together to make that site as it is today, and is one of the sites featured in the gallery of sites that's put out by Porto itself. Nonetheless, there's no wrong design choice, and encourage you to let your personality shine in whichever way you choose to go. And feel free to leverage anything that draws you in terms of how you want to be seen online, and share yourself with others in that way. One thought I might add here, however, though, is that these sort of systems do change over time. So it may or may not be that Quarto is as popular as now as it is 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So it can be important somewhat to think about the maintainability of any platform you choose, and anything that might change over time, and different things you might have to maintain as tools change throughout the years. An aside here that is maybe the simplest approach is to even just do a simple markdown README file that shows up on your GitHub profile page. And so if you go to your main profile page, that could be a great default digital presence beyond just what the metrics and commit history and other sort of things that show up automatically in your GitHub page. In order to add to that, though, you just create a public repo titled only your username, not the github.io part for website portion as discussed previously. And then you add a README file to it. Text Markdown can be added to that README file, and it can be customized to however you see fit and whatever works in the Markdown ecosystem. So as I discussed earlier, talking about what shows up even on your GitHub profile page, some people talk about wanting to improve the contribution graph, for example. Some people get very very pedantic. It's I want to have a contribution done every single day of the year, and I feel like that's a little bit unsustainable. And this person tried to explain away their lack of contribution on that day. But it's up to you how important you want to make this or not. So I think some employers can find value in that sort of thing, but there's multiple ways in which RSEs contribute to community that's beyond just committing code. So think about if this is important to you or not, and if in another way, you can also think about how you can have fun with it. So some people have had fun with it in the past, and so just being very intentional of how they commit their code over time, just to create even fun graphs. So some people is important, some people it's not. I'm just basically just making a statement so as not to overly pressure you about being too worried about these sort of ways in which you're presented with these sort of graphs. So as a question about this, I want to encourage you as other software engineers or other potential research software engineers to think about what commit expectations do you have for your own commit history. Do you think the RSE community itself has its own expectations it places on others about that? What do you think is appropriate in that sense? I think this is kind of a community defined problem, and I can't really say for myself what is actually the best practice. But maybe just in sharing what you think with others, is it maybe for 1 to 5 how important it is that you have many commits over a year. Is it a 5? Is it a 1? Do people actually care? Maybe it depends on the type of role you're doing. So I think just maybe reflect on that one and think about what's important to you. But happy to chat about that further if you have any thoughts about this at the end of our discussion today. So as I'll encourage you in just sort of highlighting this process here, I'm hoping that some of you will be encouraged to build an actual website, or maybe update your presence, whether it's on GitHub itself, or perhaps you want to just update your LinkedIn, for example. I'd ask that you, if you do so, I'd encourage you to send some screenshots of that update you might did and the URL of that site. It must fit on one widescreen slide page. You can send that to me at the email address there. And we'd be happy to share it during the poster session at US-RSE'24 conference, just to help promote people that are actively engaged in promoting the digital presence, especially if you're on the job hunt right now. So it'd be helpful to share what you do with others and help others talk about best ways in which you present yourself online. It could be definitely a conversation starter as you walk through the hall and see your site up on the screen, and perhaps want to share that experience doing this with others. Another aspect beyond personal sites, and actually before I get onto this section, any questions from what has been previously discussed? So borrowing none of this time, I'll just move on to best practices of GitHub project visibility. So this is more on a specific software project you might have published rather than something that's centered on just yourself. So this is also important, as I mentioned earlier, about promoting open science and how we share software in a meaningful way that is like useful and can be extendable, and other sort of like fair practices around software use and interactability. So one thing to highlight in that, in the same way, like you have your personal site, you document about yourself and what you find is important, and help people like highlight how they might work with you. You do the same with an individual project and software that folks might work with. So it's very important to develop robust documentation such that you can enable reproducibility for others to follow along in your tracks and potentially collaborate, work together with you. So ways to do that most effectively is to, every language tends to have a robust code style guideline to follow. And I encourage you to review those types of code style guidelines, whether you're working in Python, C, or Fortran, or Go, or Julia. There's all standard ways that the community has relatively coalesced over best ways to write code in a way that's meaningful and consistent across different software engineers. It helps for collaboration in the sense of, if someone writes it one way or uses trailing spaces in one way or tabs differently, like it's jarring to some people in terms of just like being able to regularly read code in a consistent manner. So if you can follow some conventions there, that really helps to enhancing the speed by which your colleagues can read your code, as well as just ensure that you're an active participant in the community in terms of being aware of those sort of expectations that are placed upon developers. Another aspect to consider for any code published is to, as best as you can, especially as code gets greater and greater use by your colleagues, or becomes a bigger code base, especially even just for yourself, and be able to revisit code after a couple of weeks or a month and know what you actually did, is to make sure you're adding code comments using meaningful var and function names. Those are vitally important, not only for yourself, but even then for any non-software engineers, research scientists you might share your code with, and that can help for their readability of your code and enhance that collaboration just as much. And most important, I think, but sometimes unfortunately missed, is even just adding a basic README file, talking about how you can build your code, the sort of scripts that are included hopefully with the repository to facilitate building and extending your project, and using it, running analyses, whatever you might have needing to be doing with whatever you're publishing. But it's important to just clearly document the sort of processes for folks to be able to follow and utilize. Specific tools or set of tools you might consider, especially as projects get larger and larger or require a greater collaboration, are tools such as like Read the Docs or Doxygen. Some of these tools can integrate very well with the software itself and take in like comments around, say, functions, and create like call trees and graphs between functions, and make it a more navigable documentation experience for those, say, that might want to use your code and integrate with an API provided therein. So those sort of like tools are definitely like robust ecosystems that can be leveraged for those sort of cases when they would be useful. So and similar in the GitHub sense for how I discussed, publishing your own website. Each individual software page can also have its own web page deployment. It won't go to the your username.github.io, but it will be a similar format to that, but named for your actual project that you might have deployed. And if you want to learn more about how to deploy project websites, I encourage you to read the link there, and that's simply described in that way as well. Another point in terms of thinking about sharing software is how it connects with other ecosystems, especially in the practice of science in and of itself. So it's often useful and expected to share a static point-in-time version of the software that supported a publication when a publication is made using that software. It's considered somewhat ill-formed to just only share the GitHub, in a sense of, especially GitHub being privately owned, there's not necessarily an assurance around the longevity of that platform. Not that there's any assurance of longevity of any platform, but at least for platforms like Zenodo that's aiming towards serving exclusively the scientific community, there are tools within Zenodo for archiving repos at a specific state for when a project was published. Because oftentimes you might publish some software or in a paper alongside of it, But then you have some additional science questions that the researchers want to ask about the software, and they add more features and changes to it. And maybe down the line, they end up actually breaking the software that formed the previous paper. And so you need to have a common point that you can definitely refer to as being when that software worked for that project, and making sure that that can be pulled back as needed. And Zenodo, at least as a platform, provides that opportunity. So whenever you say you publish something to Zenodo, they'll create a digital object identifier, DOI, for that GitHub and that commit at that point in time. And it will package that up to then be saved on Zenodo's platform for preservation in that space. As you mentioned, it's not only for software, as I said. Zenodo can be used for data sets, presentations, papers as well, and is another platform that is gaining some traction in terms of meeting the needs of these open publication standards for software and data. It's also important the same to include a license with any of your work. You want to make sure you review the types of licenses that are available to you, especially even perhaps consulting with colleagues, and maybe if your institution has a legal department in terms of what their expectations are around software licensing that's developed as a employee or student at a university. More often than not, you tend to own that software as an individual, but when you're part of an organization, they have some ownership as well as into it. So it's important to keep in mind like what is actually permitted in that space. But nonetheless, you should navigate that process and include that license in your software, so that others that maybe want to, fork and use your software, or however they may see fit, they know exactly those expectations they have for reusing that work. A last thing to think about, especially in terms of expanding your community and collaborators, is including a contributing Markdown file to guide and encourage that collaboration. It's one thing to publish software and just like say it's out there and people can use it just by it existing, but it's another thing to actively encourage that collaboration and talk about like, here's like this, when I want you to submit a PR, how do you do that? And like thinking about your expectations about making sure that certain tests are passing, or features are being considered as they're adding, suggesting changes to your code. Or if you don't want them to contribute and you want to keep it closed, you can do that the same, but it's always good to keep the communication open in terms of what your expectations are around that collaboration framework and what's standard is a contributing file that's put in the root of your GitHub repos. If I keep clicking the links accidentally, but I'll just get back to the presentation quick. There we go. So a few other things that are more optional to consider. Continuous integration, continuous delivery is often very important to, especially as projects get much larger. There's more and more people contributing and participating in project software development. These sort of tools and paradigms are helpful to like minimize adding bugs, and even then also instilling trust in the software and providing stable releases to your community. If someone lands on your GitHub page and sees that there are CI pipelines in use to test and verify the validity and use of the software and how it's being built, that's much more reassuring to someone to like be confident that when they download the software, it's more likely to work, and knows that the community cares about quality software development. So there's some examples within the scientific stuff community that utilize that, such as Dolphin X within the Phoenix community, or that's used for PDE solutions, or Julia as a platform. They have their own kind of like ways in which they navigate, providing documentation, as well as their own continuous integration process that whenever, say, someone pushes something and it causes a portion of the build to fail, it'll actually say it's failed, and thus then encourages the developers to be like, oh, we need to fix that. And so that's some aspects of that, and how well that's maintained, that's each community's choice. But nonetheless, it offers that reassurance that people are at least caring about making sure that their code continues to work over time as new additions and changes are made to a code base. So some successful software projects to think about. I chose here Bliss, which was the 2023 winner of the Simon Wilkinson Prize for numerical software. You can consider, they have their own, you can go to their GitHub page and repo and look through the very robust documentation about not only how to use it, but also like, past history of the software and other publications and key issues around the software to consider. But another aspect, just as a curious note, there is that they provide a Discord server to collaborate. There's all these different ways in which that people build out software and promote it online. And some ways is also, as I said, how can you build community? Like, do you want your community to exist only within the issues or PR tabs of the GitHub repo, or do you want like an intentional space like a Discord server or some other space or email listserv or any place else that might encourage that community formation? That could be very, so long as you have an intentional framework around how you want to engage with others around the work you put online, I think that's the most important in terms of thinking about these sort of ways in which digital presence can be extended in a meaningful way. As we've gone over all these sort of like ideas and practices, I think it's good just to reflect on is there one right way to manage your digital presence? Maybe just a quick yes or no to that in the chat here. Do you think is there one right way or multiple ways, or what do you guys think? And 3, 2, 1, chat. Yep, I think it's a simple answer no. That's what I would say. There's plenty of different options, and I think I like to at least emphasize the opportunity to present your personality or your own voice and how you want to be perceived online. However, are certain practices necessarily better or worse? What do you, from this presentation today or discussion, what do you think is better in terms of how you might promote your digital presence? I'll give you like a few seconds to think about that. We'll do the same thing, count down and chat. But just focus first on what are like the positive choices maybe you might think to make in terms of managing your digital presence. So as you've given that thought, let's count down. 3, 2, 1, chat. Yeah, I think we're kind of stuck in the it depends. So I mean, like, and that's kind of maybe the point. It's setting the intentionality of what are your goals of how you say are publishing software or putting yourself online. Like I think I asked a question earlier in one of the slides, like, are you aiming to communicate with the general public at large? Are you wanting to talk with other RSCs? What is the goal out of even that communication in the first place? I often think about, at least within the open science movement, especially in like user experience and design kind of space, I would like to see more opportunities for software engineers and developers and scientists to engage with potential users of their research outputs and think about like, how do they make that data more accessible to a non-technical person? Are you making that GitHub code documented in such a way that a layperson you meet on the street, maybe you just talk to someone, you get really excited meeting up for a stranger at lunch sometime, and you talk about your work you just did the other day, and it's like, hey, if you go to the software site and you can, even they have no familiarity with Python, they could like feasibly maybe even interact with that in a meaningful way that's useful to them. Are you designing for that level of engagement for folks you're wanting to interact with? And so it's as people in the chat have said, it depends. It's how others want to see you as, and how the level of engagement you want there to be. So I think that's kind of like the overall sense of all these sort of different considerations you might have in digital presence. But I hope to at least have shared with you some concrete examples of how to navigate that, and hopefully build out a more robust presence yourself of how you want to be perceived online. So I believe that's all I have to showcase with folks today. So happy to take any questions about digital presence and that. So thank you for your time. I believe folks are allowed to unmute or not if you'd like to verbalize your question, but you may also ask in the chat if you prefer. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. I'm not seeing any additional questions at least, but happy to stay online through the end of the hour and just hang out if you like. But happy to also just scroll through some of these sites and see what others have posted, and are also definitely, at least for those in the chat here right now, if you want to directly review the slides, here they are at this point. We'll be sure to post them on the site afterwards, and encourage that kind of interaction. So one question, at least I did see, is like, could you share how folks have interacted with you as a result of your site? So I think whenever I share my site, is I often encourage folks to, just learn about me and some of my interests. I feel like it's been useful, at least during the hiring process, though honestly, not too many people have brought it up during those discussions, but I think I remember being mentioned about, like, say, some of the research projects I did on like radial basis functions, for example, started a conversation during an interview process I had at one point. So I felt like that was helpful in terms of like, bringing forth the conversation to head. And it's those sort of like serendipitous interactions I think are what important. I think another like exciting thing I at least put on my site, I have like a little tracker-ish that's like embedded from, I believe I forget the API actually, but nonetheless, it's like it kind of tracks the IP addresses of those that visit, and then it'll put a little globe in the bottom left of where around the world people have visited from. And thus then it's interesting to see, like, over the years and like travels I've done and visiting different collaborators and seeing how people have like actually visited that site. And you can like, measure that yourself and, see the scope of impact you're having in terms of the ways in which you're promoting your digital presence. So yeah, I appreciate that question. I imagine you're also welcome to reach out to others in the RSE community if you're curious about different aspects of digital presence design that has facilitated collaboration and connection with others. Yeah, and I see the question, how significant is the contribution heat map to you? So I think half my time is not as much like developing my own software, is actually supporting other people's software. So in that sense, like, I know my contributions are not focused on building software, so then I'm not too worried of like needing to have a large footprint in that kind of like metric. But if I was like, someone who actually was working with code every day and had that expectation as part of like, my regular day-to-day like expectations and work and performance, I'd be a little bit concerned if I was like, large chunks of time where I was not contributing anything, for example. But it depends on the role you're having and maybe the roles you're aiming to fill. But I would maybe also emphasize, especially for any early career folks or students, that like, there should be no expectation to fill that out to any large degree, especially as an early career person, in the sense of like, people recognize that you're early at the stage of your career and you're many more opportunities to contribute. And some folks don't even contribute to GitHub. Maybe they work in a private organization and they're not allowed to contribute publicly, or they have like their own self-hosted control system that they interface with. And so there should be no hard expectations around that. Though I just do acknowledge that some people take a little bit too much expectation around that. And I would just hope that people don't get too stressed about it. And if there's an organization that expects some certain amount of quality from it, I might question the way in which they're choosing to measure folks and assess people's progress in their jobs while they're there. And that could be a red flag or not, depending on if you choose the joint organization. What's the coolest social presence site or page I have seen? I guess I can't think of good examples off the top of my head in terms of, I think I can brag about my own site just in terms of like, the ways in which, I kind of played with the JavaScript and CSS to make like tiles move around and things appear as it opens up and such. I admit it's not the most optimized site. So as being aware of the engineering behind it, it's like, this is probably a little bit slow and probably not the best way to do things in a way. But if anything, I'm most excited just by like sites that like, just allow me to learn more about the person, and also in a way that like connects me to them more personally. So like I've always liked, say, stumbling on some professors' websites and seeing like, pictures of their travels or time with family and like some of their hobbies, and seeing that alongside the professional work and the robustness of each, and encouraging that work-life balance across how they present themselves online, because we're not all just our code and our software projects. There's multiple facets to ourselves, and I'd like to see that more often in terms of people sharing more about themselves in a way that's meaningful beyond just like the social media algorithms that honestly they're kind of, I don't find social media sites the best way to share one's personal persona the best way nowadays. But the great thing about being a software engineer in the space is like you have that much more ability and expertise to be able to curate your digital presence in a meaningful way to whatever suits you, beyond to how a company might choose to present yourself through a platform like LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. So it just encourage that flexibility, and seeing people take advantage of that in creative ways is what excites me when I see it. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that's about all the questions I've seen in the chat. I believe we'll go ahead and stop the recording. And again, we'll post the recording and other materials online. And thank you for attending today and participating. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and have a great weekend.